Hello, welcome to the Spoken Word Podcast, the podcast for the everyday cyclist. I'm Peter Janunas from Gears to You and
Chris Valadez, Cycle Brookfield. Thanks everyone for being here today. Pete, what is this, episode number 5?
We're moving now.
Us, guys.
Woo-hoo!
I know, if you've been tuning in for 5 episodes, thank you. We are trying to bring you fantastic content here. Hopefully it's information that you're enjoying. Hopefully you like seeing Pete and I riff on each other here. I mean, I do this. This is my favorite part. I just like to banter with Pete. I can do this all day long. So
wonderful.
I know. Pete, you're kind of fun to hang out with.
I am fun to hang out with.
Sorry you're not here to see the Pete in action, but
if you have ideas and want to come on the show, absolutely give us a call or text or social.
Yeah. You could find us all over the place. Yeah. So social media is probably the easiest. Go to our Instagram page, Spoken Wheel Podcast. We take messages. What do the kids say? DM me, right? Yeah. So it's a DM sort of thing, right? Yeah. So sneak into our DMs if you want. Is that the way it might say this?
Sounds weird.
It sounds weird. My kids are probably cringing. So,
my kids are always cringing whenever I'm on these things.
I cringe when I'm next to you too. So So Pete, today I know we have a guest here. We're talking with someone about gravel bikes and the whole gravel scene. I have a gravel bike. I love it. I bought one a few years ago intentionally. I used to ride like a cross bike. I was doing a lot of cyclocross racing, and I bought a cross bike, and I was trying to do like these long distance gravel rides on this cross bike. But I was like dedicated. I'm like, you know what? This community is growing. It's really fun. So I bought a gravel bike, and I really enjoy it. I think you have one too,
I do have one. I bought one 3-4 years ago, I think. I like gravel. I mean, it's fun. I've done 1 or 2 races on gravel, but nothing crazy. It's cool. So before we dive deep in it, I mean, tell people what a gravel bike is. Like kind of the differences between a gravel bike and a normal mountain bike, a gravel bike and a road bike. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll guess I'll jump as the expert here for gravel bike. So gravel bike looks really similar to a road bike. The geometry is similar. So road bike, as if you're not familiar, is usually the drop bars. So you have curved bars on the road, usually skinnier tires, and you see it. Everyone thinks like race bikes, Tour de France, any sort of criterium racing. That's a typical style you see of a road bike. Gravel takes it up a notch, and the best way I can describe it is it allows for thicker, knobbier tires, and these thicker, knobbier tires allow you to get on these like backcountry roads and navigate these gravelly roads with success and ease. And it's nice because you can run the tires at a lower pressure, so you're not like bumping all over the place. You're at 40 psi, sometimes less, depending, which sounds crazy, but it actually makes the gravel riding experience nice and fun. So you got these big knobby tires on it. They're the same sort of size, but you're on like a road bike geometry, and the idea is you're doing this for a very long distance. Typically, you're not just doing it for like 5 miles or 10 miles. You're usually in some sort of community organized ride, or people out there just doing that. I know we talked to Christine Hubert, Powered by Cheesecake, in one of our previous episodes. She does a lot of these gravel roads. She uses a hardtail mountain bike, but a lot of people find a comfort in the gravel bike scenery. So like I have a Niner, which is my sort of my favorite right now. Gravel bike, it's all carbon, of course, right?
Of course it is.
Don't go in small with it.
Yeah.
But it's got all carbon everything. It's all Tegra. It's a pretty sweet bike, but you don't have to go that crazy if you're looking to get into gravel. A lot of things will work. There's many different ways to adapt tires and wheels on different bikes. So if you got something laying around and you want to convert it into a gravel, chances are you have it. I know, Pete, you come out to some gravel events.
I've been out there. I think the funny thing about gravel, and I'm going to show my age a bit here, is back in the probably late 80s, early 90s, there was a guy named John Tomac, and look this up. Maybe we'll find a picture of it. He used to just take his mountain bike and put drop bars on it.
Wow.
It was super cool. And
that's
so
OG gravel. Right
yeah, that was kind of and I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then it, 30 years later ends up being, that's the kind of the standard of how it is. But
yeah, cool. Well, I mean, it's a segue into our guest here. We're joined with us in studio is Nick Pernia. Nick runs a group that I'm part of, that I've been part of for quite some time, called the Gravel Goofballs. So
someday I'll be in it.
someday you should. Yeah, you're not cool enough yet.
I'm not.
No, but we have with us Nick today. Nick, thanks for joining us today, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, you bet, guys.
Yeah. So, Nick, maybe walk us through a little bit. I talked a little bit about the Gravel Goofballs, but maybe before we get into gravel and what that means, talk to us a little bit about how you got into cycling in general, because we're as you know, this isn't a podcast for the everyday cyclist. Gravel bike riding is its own niche market, but maybe tell us first how you started with your history with bikes.
Sure. So I would say really, like most kids of my era, we spent a lot of time on bikes, right? Just kind of shooting around the neighborhoods. So I kind of grew up pretty familiar with it. But then really what sort of spiraled me down the path that, eventually turned me into a quote unquote cyclist was I had bought a bike when I was going to school in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Nothing special, but it had gotten stolen. And I've since had probably 3 or 4 more stolen, right?
Oh, man.
But when I graduated, I decided I was like, I'm gonna buy myself another bike. I really enjoyed kind of riding around, exploring the city, and when I went to the shop to buy a bike, I was gonna just get something kind of traditional, like a hybrid of some kind. But then my folks gave me a call and said, "Hey, we were thinking about giving you a graduation present of some kind. So here's maybe some cash that you weren't expecting. If you wanted to do something with that while you're at the bike shop, that's up to you." And I was like, "Score! I'm gonna buy the bike that I came in here for, and then I'm gonna check out what road bikes are all about, because it was just a totally different kind of side to cycling, a little bit more of a commitment, if you will. But that's what got me kind of into cycling, was buying myself a bike that could perform at a higher level than, your traditional like $400, $500 type of bike. Then I moved to Chicago. I sold my car, so I only had bikes to commute with and get around. I started working summers at a bike shop because every year I seem to get more and more into the hobby. And
Plus, it's probably a great way to save a little money working in a bike shop.
It was. I still to this day. So that was.
That's why I have one.
Gosh, support the habit.
It was 12 to 15 years ago when I was working at this shop, and I still ride some of the gear that I was given by the
What
reps.
shop were you at?
I was at Village Cycle Center in Old Town.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so great big shop. It gave me, that was when I first started kind of surrounding myself with the culture. And then it sort of.
And plus, you didn't have a car, right? So you were getting around primarily by bike, I'm assuming.
100%.
Were you riding winters in the city as well?
Yeah. That's all I did was ride. My buddies used to even give me a hard time and laugh at me when we'd all be going out on the weekend and everybody's jumping in cabs. I would just say, "Hey, I'll meet you at the bar." It's like I'm gonna jump on the bike and I'm gonna fly there. And that was my most enjoyable time of the entire night. Screw actually going to the bar. I was like, I just like to ride to the bar.
Getting there by bike.
Yeah.
I think I lived in a city for a long time without cars. Just commuting by bike and it's the way to go.
It absolutely was. I mean, I used to tell people back then, if you have to travel, anywhere between 1 to 5 miles in the city of Chicago, it's like just ride your bike. It's anything. It's silly otherwise.
The bike lanes are getting better.
The infrastructure is amazing this day and age. So it's the way to do it.
There's obviously more work that needs to be done to keep the road safer, but there's a lot of ways that if you're riding your bike as an everyday cyclist, getting out there on the road and actually experience it and communicating with your local municipality or the city that you are involved in, that's a great way to enhance bikes. Make sure that you're constantly advocating for yourself as a cyclist, because as our guest Nick is saying here today, there are many people who choose to ride choose their transport to be bikes, and that's a really important thing, not only for you as a person, but it's a great way to save a little money too. I mean, 1 to 5 miles on a bike is, you can get there pretty darn quickly with most stuff. I mean, I'm sure Nick, probably half the reason you did is like, I'm commuting in the city of Chicago, 5 o'clock traffic, you probably blazing past cars at that time.
It's always faster with a car or than a bike than a car in the city.
Right.
And I mean, when I lived there a long time ago. I've lived out here for 9 years, I guess, but it's much better now. Just the way it's set up, the infrastructure, the bike lanes, everything is much better than what it once was. And it's getting better. I mean, everyone knocks it and everything about riding around the city on the bikes and how they say how bad it is, but it's getting better. And compared to a lot of cities that I've been in and ridden in, it's a world of difference. So
I think we're very fortunate to have good infrastructure here in the city and in the suburbs as well, where we are, most of us now. But Nick, I know you moved away from the city at some point and you went off to the suburbs. So how did you continue your cycling, experience after you moved from the city out to the burbs?
Yeah. So my wife and I we probably looked at maybe 15 or 20 different homes in our pursuit to finding the right home. And it really when maybe it was on our 15th or our 20th home, our realtor showed us a house that really didn't have much of what we wanted. Like, it was like a lot of it needed work. We weren't really too, keen on it being closer to a main road, but it was about 30 feet away from the Great Western Trail. So,
nice. Yeah.
My wife's a big runner. I'm an avid cyclist, and we saw that, and I went on Google Maps and was like, because I lived in the city and I didn't know anything about the trail system in the burbs, but as soon as I, hit the bike route filter on Google Maps and all those green lines, laid itself over the screen, it was like, oh my God, the trails are endless over here, and if I have immediate access to it, then I'm going to be living pretty good. So
I think similarly for me, when looking for homes, came to Brookfield, and the Salt Creek Trail was right, almost literally behind my house. So it was an eye-opening experience with young kids, to be able to get on the trail with them, just kind of toting around. And I think the kids, all my kids grew up on the Salt Creek Trail, riding their bikes in a safe capacity. That was, for me, quite amazing. It wasn't not the same. We have a paved trail on the Salt Creek, but I know, the Great Western and the Prairie Path, Nick, for you, were kind of like the crushed limestone gravel. So
exactly.
Were you taking your fancy road bike that your parents helped you buy on the Prairie Path?
So that I still had that, but yeah, once I moved to the burbs and I had access to that trail, it was like, well, I didn't really know anybody in the area that was riding at the time because I just moved there. I've never liked the idea of riding road bikes alone on the streets. I didn't know the area well enough to know where the safe streets were. I was like, why am I complicating things? I need to get myself a bike that's suited for the trail system. So I actually bought a cross bike because this is, probably 8 years ago, or maybe closer to 10 years ago. And that was I don't think there was really much talk about a gravel bike at that
the
point.
gravels weren't really out yet.
Right. So I had bought a cross bike.
So you made the same mistake I made. Not a mistake. I had a cross bike as well. It was
The cross bikes are mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us more how you did cross.
Well, back then, there weren't even too many options with disc brakes, right? So it was all these like cantilever brakes, and at least the bike that I had, the cantilever brakes were not the best at stopping, which is okay for a cyclocross race, right? You don't want to have brakes that just lock you up, and you've got to build your momentum back up and whatnot. But I took that bike and I took some advice from a cousin of mine that had done Barry-Roubaix. And I was like, hey, I think I'm going to give this a shot. And I was like, is my bike okay? He's like, yeah, your bike's totally fine. I was like, okay, whatever. You've done this before.
Last words.
For the Barry-Roubaix, to take a bike like that out, I do that race, as you know, Nick, every year. And having a specific bike for that race, I think is one that's built for it is good. But good on you for taking out and do the Barry.
Yeah, I gave it a shot. It was the first organized event I had ever done. It was humbling, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I was underbiked by a long shot. The tires were too narrow. I think I was running like 32s.
Oh, you're like real cross at that point.
Yeah, and the cantilever brakes, so it's like all the descents, you're flying down these descents, and I had no stopping power. And the 32s at the bottom of the descents where all the loose gravel and sand collects. It was just like, it was a nightmare.
You're talking about the width of the tire.
The width of the tire.
Width of the tires, yeah.
So, I survived it. It was a great time, a kick-ass event. Lots of people show, a lot of people commute, but make the drive out from this area. So I'd recommend it. But I decided at that point, I was like, all right, if I'm going to continue on with doing events like this, I got to get on the right bike. So then I invested in, I ride a Niner as well, with disc brakes, and I run 38 mil tires for the most part, but I have the capacity to run wider.
So what we're saying is, hey Niner,
Yeah.
if you're interested in supporting the Spoken Wheel podcast, would love to demo some bikes here.
Please.
We're apparently fans in the gravel scene of your stuff. So
For sure.
So you got a Niner. So that's your current.
Yeah, it's my current bike. It's the one that I put the most miles on for sure. I've over the last few years, I've acquired some other bikes, a newer road bike, a mountain bike recently, a commuter. So but the gravel bike, the Niner that I have, is by far gets the most love and affection.
Just for the record, I don't have a Niner.
Well,
No?
time to go, Pete. Time to go.
Yep.
You're out of here.
Yeah.
No. Well, Nick, that's so that's how you started with your gravel sort of stuff. Was you bought the Niner, you're on gravel paths. What happened after that? Once you started getting out there and exploring the world that was the western suburbs of Chicago.
Yeah. So
where does the Western Trail start?
I believe it starts like, well, it's weird because the Great Western Trail sort of intersects with the Illinois Prairie Path, right? Yeah. But so they come together in Villa Park, and then I believe from there east it's considered the Illinois Prairie Path. They come together again on further west off by Prince Crossing Road, which is in the West Chicago area, and that'll split you. You can then, it's like a junction of three different directions. So the Great Western Trail is roughly like, I'm going to call it 15 miles long. Mm-hmm. And it was an old rail system, so it's just dead straight. Clearly you have intersections and side roads that you have to cross through. But but that you can, if you're on the Great Western Trail, you can link up. I mean, quite literally, we do it through the club that I run. You can ride to west, Wisconsin and back, very easily, all on trail. So like the trail system around here is pretty phenomenal.
Part of it is by Campton Hills, right?
Yep.
Yes, yeah.
Then it goes west to Sycamore.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I said they came together in West Chicago, but right, you can keep boogieing on out
for you cyclocross guys. It's where the
Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
state championships is
champs,
it? Is it?
Yeah, it's a fun event.
Campton
It's
Hills.
a great one. So Nick, we're kind of talking about the group that you started. We've referenced it here a few times, called the Gravel Goofballs.
Yeah.
I know this is how I met you. I was recommended, like, hey Chris, you got that cyclocross bike, and you like to do some gravel and dirt stuff, and blah blah blah. And next thing you know, I have a dedicated gravel bike, probably because of the encouragement in the crowd that started with the Goofballs. So tell our listeners who don't know, who are the Gravel Goofballs?
Yeah. So I started this club 4 years ago this month. Facebook was kind enough to remind me of that a few weeks ago.
Happy birthday to
There
the
you go.
Goofballs. There you go. All right,
the big four.
All right.
And showing your age that you still use Facebook.
Yeah, this is true. I'll tell you though, I run into so many people that are like, I'm not on Facebook. How else do I hear about you? It's like, well, just make a fake account and get on, because it is the best way to stay in touch with this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So in 2020, and it was in February, like I had mentioned, I used to ride all year round, like no matter the weather, I'd get out, I'd just go for it. And it was always hard to find people that wanted to make bad decisions. So I kind of just I built up this Facebook page, and I'd known a couple of guys at that point or another that like to get out and ride in all weather, and we would just use the Facebook page, Gravel Goofballs, as a way to sort of just meet and talk about what we're going to be doing, planning our rides. And then, I mean, realistically, it grew completely organically. I don't know who was telling who about it, but it all just sort of started to come together. I didn't start it because there wasn't a resource like this in the area. I didn't know if there was or if there wasn't. It was something that I and a couple of guys basically wanted to just make our own lives easier.
Nick, what's the tagline? I don't want to spoil it, so give it off for
night rides all day.
There you go.
Clever.
So that was that's a good point. That was kind of our niche. Was we would mostly ride at night, which I don't think really anybody was doing.
Right.
But it adds
for obvious reasons.
It adds a cool dynamic. And because 90% of our rides are 90% trail, it's like you can get away with riding around at night and really not having any concerns about cars and whatnot. But I've always told people too, I feel safer riding at night on the street than I do during the day. The traffic is much lower, and if you've got the right lights, and you are I feel like you're bulletproof almost. At least you're visible from hundreds of yards away. And then once you get 5-6 guys, now we're pulling rides together of 20 to 30 guys when the weather's nice. Right. You can pretty much get away with anything and feel pretty safe. But that's how we first kind of came together. We needed to find a group that liked to ride through all weather. Sometimes we would search out the nastiest weather we could ride through.
Yes.
Everybody likes a good opportunity to test their kit, and the rest is kind of not necessarily history, but we've been building up over time. At the moment, I think we have close to 1,200 members as far as the folks that are active on the Facebook page.
Wow. In 4 years?
In 4 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And we ride out of Wheaton, and we ride, as of last year, a fellow member decided, hey, I live kind of far away from where the main ride, starts. Would you mind if I sort of started a chapter myself? It's like, hey, knock yourself out. So there's another group that meets in Grays Lake, Illinois.
Gravel Goofballs of the North, right?
Yeah.
I know. I've jumped into a few rides up there.
Have you? Okay.
I have. It's good. I mean, it's the same essence, right? Of getting out at night on these sort of dirt roads, all different sort of terrains and conditions. It's really a community, Nick, that I applaud you for starting, because it's really been a massive part of not only me but like my cycling career, the camaraderie of some of these events. It's fantastic. So if you don't know the Gravel Goofballs, I highly suggest that you look them up. As Nick said, it's a growing group, 4 years in the making, and it continues. The gravel scene is not going anywhere. I know, Pete, I'm sure you're seeing gravel bikes in the shop.
I see more and more of them in the shop. I hear more and more stories of them. It's just, the bikes are cool. I mean, they're fun to, not even just it's just fun to cruise around because they'll go over pretty much everything. The tire pressure's lower. I mean, it's a cool.
Who needs a fat bike when you get a gravel bike, right?
It keeps going back to fat bikes, which we don't own.
We keep talking about those darn fat bikes.
I know. Yeah. So when do you guys meet? What time? What days?
Tonight.
Yeah, you can't say that on here.
Yeah, that's right. Who knows when it'll
day
later?
agnostic when we record.
Yeah. So
We'll edit it out later.
Yeah, Thursday evenings are our standing ride.
Standing rides. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's 6:30 start. We do 30 miles. We usually find a midway point to pull over. It could be at a brewery for a quick beer. It could be at a Walgreens for a snack and a drink and a beer. It could be there's usually that was a big part of why I'm talking about the stop in the middle of it is I'd ridden with a handful of other groups prior to, and every group that I've ever ridden with has kept me coming back. But I never really got to know any of the people that I was riding with. You'd kind of show up all at the same time, and then you'd get out, you'd hammer, and then everybody would split.
Yeah.
And there wasn't really much of a sense of who you were riding with. So these kind of little breaks in the middle of the ride, and I'm talking, 15 minutes,
right.
Just enough to sort of catch your breath, get a water, take off a layer, kind of the essential moves of any ride anyway. And you're back off in movement. But yeah, so it's Thursday nights, 30 miles. There's a quick stop in between. I like to say it's a casual vibe at a quick pace.
Yeah, it's the group has gotten faster, and that's mostly Nick because
Has it gotten faster or has someone gotten slower?
oh, you're digging in.
Yeah.
You're digging in. Who knows? TBD. Let's talk about that later. But no, what I like about this group specifically is that, as Nick mentioned, that break in between. It's a lot of fun. You get to know people, and I ride with groups all the time. And if you have the opportunity to join a Gravel Goofballs ride, if you got a gravel bike, if you got a cross bike, you got a Nick, I know you call out for flat bar Thursdays on occasion, so you got those hardtail mountain bikes or a mountain bike with a flat bar. You can bring anything out to one of these rides Thursday nights. There's 2 chapters, one in Wheaton and one up in Grays Lake, as we mentioned, so try to find the group on Facebook. We'll put some links into the podcast for that, but it's really a lot of fun, the ability to be able to jump on gravel bikes and see nighttime rides. I know, as you said, lights are important, Nick. I know a lot of us run another plug here for outbound lighting. So when you have an outbound light on the front of your bike, please do test out the lights if you have an opportunity. And I know, Nick, we talked about this off camera at some point, but outbound lighting has been very generous. They're donating some demo light units to us. So we'll thank them later at another time and maybe have them on our podcast. But having good lights at night, Thursday night rides,
primo.
It's good stuff. So Nick, this has been a lot of fun. I know I get really excited talking about gravel rides because it's part of the thing that I probably enjoy most about cycling right now is the opportunity. So thanks for coming out and sharing your story, and hopefully we get this 4 years and growing. We'll talk about in 4 more years and it'll be like millions of people.
Yeah, you'll have a
few
more chapters out there.
It's tough enough to coordinate to keep everybody together on a 30-person group ride. So I don't know. Well, if it grows to 300, that might be.
Good luck to you, man. Yeah. no, Nick, you've done a fantastic job out there. So thanks for coming out and inspiring everyone to get out in this community that you formed, and people that I'm happy to call friends as well out there on the bike. So thanks for coming out and sharing your story.
Thank you so much.
It's been a lot of fun.
You bet. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. So this is the Spoken Wheel podcast. Thank you for tuning in to, what do we say? This episode number 5. Episode number 5. Talking gravels today. Nick from Gravel Goofball was here. We are the Spoken Wheel podcast. Make sure to find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify, anywhere you grab your podcast to listen. You can also watch this on YouTube, which is good. We are always thankful for our production crew here to record. Here to Record is doing a fantastic job of keeping the sound and video and everything intact here. And we're here at Media Space Studios in Brookfield recording this wonderful spot here today. I'm Chris from Cycle Brookfield.
And I'm Peter Janunas from Gears to You in Riverside, Illinois. And thank you guys all for tuning in today.
See you next time.